Welcome everybody to this session D333, Sustainability Transition. My name is McAloone. I'm professor at DTU and very pleased to welcome you to this session of the design conference on the day 3 of the conference. I'm very much looking forward to the 5 papers that we have here. You could say that it's rather heavily Nordic based. It's good to see you here, Panos, to balance out a little bit with your heavyweight from the US to bring some balance to the whole proceedings.
North America, yeah.
Exactly. So we have a paper from, and I'm going to introduce the papers very briefly just now, and then each of them in turn as they come along. So first of all, we have a paper from Chalmers University, which has received one of the reviewers' favorites. So congratulations to you. And we'll be repeating that a bit later. And this is about designing innovation. And it's basically the minutes of a conversation and a workshop at the INRCD conference in Gothenburg in 21. Then we have a paper from Brita, and I hope Brita is on her way. And Robert will, yes, I could just see she's on her way. Great to see you. Perfect timing, Brita. Nice to see you. On relational design, for a more socio-technical approach, and then also from on the socio-technical sides, but actually all sides of sustainability, Pauline and Anabel are making a presentation, and Panos is here to take the discussion on modeling social benefits and system design optimization. Then we go to Aalto University in Finland, where Floris, also a reviewer's favorite, rewardee, so congratulations to you, is going to tell us about designers and how designers act as change agents for sustainability in design. And then last but not least, we have Tyler, who is from the Technical University of Denmark, who is going to introduce us to some of the new insights into companies which are looking towards the Science-Based Targets Initiative and how circular economy and circular product design is supporting the carbon reduction strategies, because it's promised to be up to half of the carbon reductions can come from circular economy. And let's see how companies are doing there, those that are committing to the science-based targets. So I think it's an exciting hour and a quarter we have together. So without further ado, we're going to go into the papers one by one, into the presentations. And if we present the first one, first of all, and this is going to be presented by Isaksson, but the paper is written by Ulla and Claudia Eckert. Ulla is Professor of Product Development at Chalmers University of Technology, and he was the conference chair of INRCD 21. And together with his co-author, Professor Claudia Eckert, they were elected to both be co-chairs, in fact, of the Design Society Advisory Board. So when we watch the video, I'd like to encourage you all to write your questions in the chat, and I'm going to do the same. In fact, write my questions in the chat, so that then we can sort through them one by one. And remember to tag the person you're asking the question to. And I know that it always takes a little bit of time to ask the questions, because we need to watch the video first. We may have read the paper, but let's put the questions in the chat and tag the people, and then we'll use that as the way to steer the discussion, or at least to start the discussion. So without further ado, over to the first presentation, which is given by Isaksson.
Hello and welcome. I am Isaksson, and I have prepared this manuscript together with Professor Claudia Eckert from Open University in UK. We report and reflect on an important workshop held at INRCD 21 in Gothenburg, and it deals with the role that engineers and engineering designers will have when realizing innovation for sustainability. First, let us address the challenge that sustainability implies. Sustainability is not really only the environmental and ecological aspect, although that is very critical for the climate, but it also deals with sustainability in society. It's quite evident from the last month's happenings in Europe. And of course, there is an economic reality that also has to be included in the notion of sustainability. Since the challenges are of such nature that it requires rather dramatic changes or rapid and instant changes, innovation comes into play. We really need to make changes, and engineers will have a vital role, or is expected to have a vital role in this process. This is what we addressed in INRCD as a conference, and especially a Friday workshop that we held in the end of INRCD 21. What is apparent is that innovation is not really an option. It's really something that we need to do to deal with the changes and the challenges that we face.
The work started already back in 2018, where we held the workshop with industrialists and academics, where we also identified a number of conflicting trends that drove different behavior. We used that insight to form 5 themes that were used to organize the conference workshop at INRCD now in 2021.
During the INRCD week, we had invited a range of inspiring and important keynote speakers who addressed the topic of design in motion, very much relating to the transformation needed in our society and the industry from a sustainability point of view. During the workshop day, we started off with yet another set of inspiration talks. Here we have Martin Ashton from UK, who pointed out that manufacturing industry, being quite mature, is now in a phase where they need to do radical and even disruptive changes to their products and their way of working, and they need to do so without compromising risk or safety. There were about 100 participants attending the workshop, discussing the topics presented, some of which were on site in 2 different venues to comply with the COVID rules, but a large portion were also online and attended. After the groups had presented their results from the workshop, they also challenged an invited panel comprising of different people from industry and government and university, who gave their view on the role of engineering in realizing innovation. As a result, we saw that engineers will need to embrace even a wider set of disciplines in the design activities than today. They need also to combine both incremental, radical, and disruptive innovations, especially from a company perspective. We need to balance the investments. New designs, new products needs to interact with an already existing infrastructure. We see that design methods themselves, they need to deal with the systemic nature of sustainability to avoid sub-optimization. The engineers themselves and companies need also commit to lifelong learning. You need to learn and unlearn while building on and utilizing your experiences. This is also a role for the universities to keep up with the students after completed training. Through the new ways of working, not at least with the remote working that we've gotten used to, we see also that we need to have a new healthy work balance mode, and best practice is yet to be seen.
We also made some concluding observations from the group work and panel discussion. One of them being that sustainability challenge doesn't have any shortcuts. This means that we cannot sub-optimize, we need to think in long terms and what the impact it has over the life cycle. Otherwise, we risk to introduce new problems. We see also that innovative solutions are not really optional. We simply need to make changes that includes also the behavior of how we and our customers and users work. Engineers need also to think and act systematically, need to bring in and embrace a wider set of aspects, ethical aspects, for instance, that come into play. The company noted that they needed very ambitious and achievable goals. When formulated, they really drive innovation in a proper sense, but they are difficult to define. We see also that we have already through the COVID evidence of being adaptive and resilient in the way we work and how we innovate in products.
We see also that there is a tradition needed in the culture from a more incremental and refining culture to a more innovative culture. This goes both for the higher education system, where we need to find new collaborative ways of working in the ecosystem. We need to design cross-disciplinary, and we need also to communicate between and across organizational boundaries. Universities have a big role in doing this. Finally, we see that design itself is really a key aspect in this, in understanding and transforming the needs to novel solutions. And this is very much the definition of design. Thank you very much from me and Claudia, and we welcome questions.
Thank you very much, Ola and Claudia, for that presentation. So now we move on to the next presentation, and this is from Brita Fladvad Nielsen from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology in Norway on relational design. And Brita is a associate professor at the Department of Design at NTNU, and she has a background in multiple complex design settings, including design for humanitarian markets, design methods for smart cities, and design for socially sustainable housing, plus many others. Before her research career, Brita worked internationally with Design Without Borders and UNIDO, so she brings a truly socio-technical background and input to the discussion here. So let's look at Brita's presentation of her paper.
Welcome to our paper on relational design. This is written by myself. I'm an associate professor at NTNU, and Marel Bjerck, who is also an associate professor at the Department of Design in Norway at NTNU. In this paper, we argue for a relational turn in design, and especially in service design. This is because a well-designed service facilitates and aims at situations in which meetings between people and services contribute to people functioning in the best possible way, given their context and situation, their immediate environment, in their everyday life, and an interaction with the community. And we argue for this approach because people's life situations are dynamic and interdependent, more dynamic than what our current design tools in service design can offer. And a relational approach is radical because it offers new ways of conceptualizing how we understand knowledge, and it removes us as designers from this duality that we are historically associated with in scientific research, for example, separating body, mind, and system organism. And we recognize that this has been a problem in service design, in which you have, for example, a service blueprint where you separate the receiver from the service distributor, and the formats don't offer dynamic and more complex ways of solving service challenges. And that means that the relational approach in design brings an understanding of designers as agents located in manifold social relations. It challenges this duality of the designer as a manager, facilitator of the design process. We believe that this view on agency fits very well with the context that we, at least in welfare states, find ourselves in. And we have used two design projects to illustrate this need for relational approach. And the backdrop of the two service design projects is the dilemmas of the current welfare state. Norway is based on a welfare state model, meaning that citizens have equal rights to proper services, including, for example, education, social support, mobility, housing, based on everyone working and paying taxes. Services are the fundamental infrastructure of a welfare state. Today, more people die of loneliness than smoking. This is an illustrating examples of how our current welfare services are not designed for these chronic situations. And this is according to Cottam, because our services are designed with the provider-recipient framework, in which you get some symptoms, you go to your doctor, you receive a prescription that will help you go home and get well. But once we have more families stuck in poverty, more families stuck in a vicious circle of chronic illnesses, complex life situations, poverty, obesity, and loneliness, for example, this provider-recipient framework falls short of helping people. And she calls for not only a more human-centered, but a more relationship-centered approach in which we try to help communities, and we try to help communities and people grow together and empower each other. And Nordic welfare states and service providers are aware of the need for new mindsets to meet this burden of chronic illness, poverty traps, and lack of access to equal services. This growth of need for help for chronic illness and poverty obviously is a very expensive situation to be in when we see that everybody should have equal rights to proper services, while the number of people, for example, on permanent social support is increasing. And in order to move away from this mindset, we need to move into a new paradigm where the citizen is an active and engaged part of the services. So in our paper, we are illustrating the need for relational turn-in design through the project Designing for Health Literacy in Orthopedic Services, and also in the project Designing for Community Engagement in Low-Income Housing. So through analyzing these two design projects, we found that our future socioeconomic sustainability depends upon design that considers people as integrated parts of social networks instead of tools, for example, such as personas or user journeys that focus mainly on identifying individual users of services and products. And we need a relationship focused rather than a tool-dependent discourse for service design. And we, in order to do this, we need a new vocabulary with relationships in mind. And the figure to the right is Prolensky's mattering circle, which provides one such framework to understand design through. So there are other disciplines that we could take into account to grow our vocabulary as designers and propose more relational approaches, especially to service design, which is very prominent in designing our future welfare states and welfare services. So that was a very short presentation. I hope you read the paper to understand more of our thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Brita, for that presentation, and we look forward to the questions that are going to come in the chat and later on as well for that. So the next paper up is presented by Pauline Rajski and Anabel Sicko. And this is a paper with a long title, but it's about modeling social benefits in system design. And Panos is here to take the questions for that. I'm not sure whether any of the other colleagues are here, Panos. But so just a background to the two authors mentioned here. Anabel Sicko is a fourth-year undergraduate student in environmental engineering at the University of Michigan, focusing on sustainable engineering systems. And Pauline Rajski is a third-year undergraduate student studying industrial and operations engineering. And it's not in the notes on ConfTool, but Panos Papalambros is professor at the University of Michigan and a long-time member of the Design Society, former president and current ex officio member of the Board of Management, and generally a very knowledgeable guy. And he's going to be able to field the questions as well when they come. So looking forward to this presentation and to the conversations and discussions that come afterwards.
Hello, my name is Anabel Sicko, an undergraduate research assistant with the Optimal Design Laboratory at the University of Michigan. Along with my colleague Pauline, I will be summarizing our findings in our review of literature in order to identify design attributes which help describe social benefits in system design optimization projects. In our Integrated Natural Resource Conservation and Development INRCD Agriculture Energy Project, we began identifying system parameters with an only goal of maximizing profits. Upon further consideration, we wish to also consider the other ways such a system could affect a community and translate sociological definitions of social benefits into more quantifiable metrics. Upon review of previous research into social benefits from both design optimization and sociological lenses, we identified 7 categories into which attributes of social impacts fell.
These were the 7 attributes derived from the literature review, which includes human development, education, health, environmental security, energy access, and economic prosperity. These attributes were derived from the successes and failures mentioned in the INRCDs in Africa from a previous literature review conducted. They also align with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Each attribute set was then broken down into characteristics that can be quantified by the optimization model. The following figure demonstrates the hierarchical breakdown of the attribute sets. As you can see, there are several linking variables between the different attribute sets, and many of these sets are related to each other, and some characteristics are not entirely independent. However, each of the attributes are standalone. Going further into the first attribute, which is the human development attribute, the focus was mostly on women and their rights. The literature indicated that time was a major contributor to the limited opportunities for women. This refers to the limited amount of time women have due to being overburdened with childcare and household responsibilities. Moving on to the second attribute, which is the environmental attribute, which focuses on the human benefits from ecological services. We break this down into clean water and air, habitat restoration, and carbon sequestration. Many of these are also linked to the health attribute. The energy access attribute refers to the access to reliable and affordable energy. It is linked to climate change, poverty, inequality, food security, health, and education. This attribute is broken down into health risks, lighting systems, and allocation of time. Much of the literature discusses better access to modern technology, leading to improved opportunities with extended access to lighting and less dangerous emissions from stoves. The health attribute is broken down into household dependence, improved air and water, more job opportunities, better energy systems, and sustainable building design. This attribute is a standalone attribute, however, its characteristics are closely linked to those of other attributes. Moving on to the security attribute, we can see security is broken down as protection measures and crime exposure. This attribute was included because it directly links to people's freedom and their ability to live safely and securely. The economic prosperity attribute is broken down into the diversification of livelihoods and indirect income opportunities. Proper implementation of INRCD projects can lead to more income generating opportunities. Going into the final attribute, which is education, we know that it's strongly tied to economic prosperity and security attributes, although it is important as a standalone attribute as well. Studies have indicated that better educational policies lead to higher incomes and decreases in crime rates. Moving into our conclusion, we had 3 main takeaways from our literature review. The first being a system model can capture trade-offs between technical, economic, and more general social decisions. The second, INRCD projects have natural multi-objective system optimization formulas, and a social benefits objective will be combining them in some way. And finally, constraint functions are derived primarily from upper and lower bounds on relative attributes.
The attributes we have identified are complex and will require further research in order to account for their externalities. Further work on this project will include building a model that can capture the nuances of the attributes we have described while trying to identify the overall benefits of a system. Thank you for your time. We would now be happy to answer any questions you have.
Many thanks to Anabel, Pauline, and to Panos for that presentation. So we go to the next one. We have 2 left, and this next one is the second awardee of the reviewer's favorite paper. So congratulations one more time, Floris. And Floris van der Marel graduated from his master's in design research for interaction with a focus on cultural differences in the Netherlands and Turkey. Currently, he's doing his doctoral studies at Swinburne and Aalto University's Design Factories, a combined PhD there, combining design facilitation and research practices to enhance understanding of how employee voices are heard in organizational change-making. And Floris is going to present his paper on designers as change agents towards sustainability. So let's listen to Floris's presentation.
Good day, everybody, and thanks for tuning into my presentation on designers as change agents. My name is Floris, and on behalf of Tua Björklund and her research team at Aalto University Design Factory in Helsinki, Finland, I'm presenting our research today. So, as you know, the role of design is increasing in organizations with known benefits of better product performance, higher return on investment, increased innovativeness, and similarly, sustainability interest is rising due to alarming data regarding climate change, as well as increasingly active social movements. So there are multiple calls for addressing sustainability-related challenges in more holistic ways, taking into account all three pillars of sustainability and also beyond the product and service level. However, sustainable design in practice leaves much to be desired, and multiple studies suggest designers struggle due to a lack of prioritization of sustainability concerns. So therefore, we felt the world could benefit from shedding some light on how some designers currently advance sustainability. So what we've done is we've interviewed designers in 101 organizations, focusing on the level of design in the organization, as well as their role in advancing sustainability. And then based on their responses, we identified 3 levels of design utilization, being low, where design was hardly used, design being integrated in the process level, and design at a strategic level. We then also studied the segments of advancing sustainability that were shared by the designers, and we identified these 6 overarching categories that are here on the slide. So each of those roles is present at each the design utilization level, but there are some nuances between them. So what I'll do is I'll go walk through all 6 roles, and I'll explain the difference of advancing for each design utilization level per role to hopefully contribute to supporting more effective sustainability design practices and wider scale sustainability transitions. So first, to advance sustainability, bringing a human connection was most commonly brought up. So all of these in this category focused on user centricity, but for different reasons. So designers working in organization with lower levels of design utilization mostly focused on bringing in user centricity and customer experience angles. So they're connected to a competitive advantage, which is the economic pillar of sustainability. Then in organizations where design was at the process level, designers mentioned leveraging user understanding to better inform the public in making environmentally responsible decisions easy and attractive. And then in organizations with design utilization on a strategic level, designers saw their role as creating impact clarity and considering marginalized groups. So more emphasis on the social progress. The second role that was mentioned was creating shared understanding across diverse stakeholders and balancing priorities across the 3 pillars of sustainability. At the lower level, this was usually about the user needs versus environmental concerns. Then at the process level, designers worked through tensions between different people, such as user needs and ethical considerations, for example, in relation to cybersecurity and accessibility. And then at a strategy level, designers expressed navigating tensions between environmental concerns and keeping the business viable. Designers also advance sustainability by exploring sustainable alternatives. So in organizations with low design utilization, this often meant developing or finding new materials that are more environmentally friendly or more durable. Where design was at a process level, designers saw it as their role to drive change by completely reimagining products. And then in design utilization at the strategy level organizations, designers took it even a step further and invited people with relevant expertise to collaboratively experiment and explore alternatives. A 4th way designers advanced sustainability was by taking on the role of mediator and educator. And at the lower level, that could mean supporting collaborative goal setting or prototyping to communicate the value of ideas. Then at the process level, designers focused on facilitating dialogues and discussions, for example, to support understanding and cooperation or to arbitrate disagreements. And then designers in organizations with design at the strategy level additionally develop tools and toolkits to support others in more user-centric work in advancing sustainability. Some designers also found their role in advancing sustainability by contributing to the production process. On a lower design utilization level, designers leverage their knowledge of materials and their skills to look at the production chain. For designers working in organizations with design utilization at the process level, emphasis was more on ensuring the longevity of products. And then designers working in organizations with strategic design utilization mentioned questioning the basic necessity of the products and developing tools to evaluate the impact of resources and processes alike. Now, the last role that the designers mentioned was that of a problem solver. At the lower level, that could mean moving between abstract and concrete. At the process level, more specific circular economy and sustainability mapping tools were mentioned as ways to reduce the carbon footprint. And designers working in organizations on strategic decision utilization levels shared handling complex problems by breaking them down into sub-problems. And additionally, they concretized issues using prototyping and storytelling techniques. So overall, we see common themes of human-centeredness, holism, managing complexity, and generativeness here. So this is all very well aligned with established research on service design and design thinking. However, the 6 roles in the current study also reveal additional nuance in terms of enacting these themes through influencing solutions, understanding, or facilitation organizations, depending on the design utilization level. So, for example, mediating across stakeholders highlights a combination of co-creation and interdisciplinary collaboration in a facilitative role, whereas exploring new alternatives pairs co-creation, creativity, and experimentation with a problem-solving role. And bringing a human connection highlights leveraging empathy and user-centeredness, with different sustainability aims being highlighted at different design utilization levels. So overall, there are some clear takeaways from the study for various stakeholders. Firstly, as said, we gain additional nuance in terms of enacting design and sustainability values. Secondly, designers can use these findings to consider various pathways, and it reminds them to keep learning and adapting as the design and sustainability needs will evolve. And then for managers, this informs which capabilities to look for in candidates to further advance design and sustainability. And for us educators, this supports us in designing what knowledge and tools our students to equip with. So that is all I wanted to share with you now. If after reading the paper you're interested in the full report we wrote on this, please do visit our website designfactory.alta.fi/design sustainability, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions or comments. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Floris, for that. And you hereby get the Session Chairs Award for the fanciest presentation as well. It was very nice. So last but not least, we move on to Tyler Sommer. And Tyler is a postdoctoral researcher at D2 Construct, the Department of Civil and Mechanical Engineering. And her research is looking at the circularity of value chains. And Tyler has written this paper together with Daniela Pigroso and myself around looking at to what extent is circular product design supporting carbon reduction strategies by analyzing Nordic manufacturing firms that have committed to the Science Based Targets initiative. So let's listen to Tyler's presentation. And remember to bring the comments
Hello, everyone.
Tyler's
My name
and
is Tyler.
Floris's
I'm a
presentation.
researcher at the Technical University of Denmark, and today I'm going to present our paper entitled "To What Extent is Circular Product Design Supporting Carbon Reduction Strategies? An Analysis of Nordic Manufacturing Companies with the Science-Based Targets Initiative." And this work emerged in the context of a climate change scenario in which corporate engagement has an enormous potential to reduce global emissions. And then companies are urged to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions across their value chains as much and as quick as possible. And in this context, companies are committing themselves to science-based targets, and they are employing a range of emission reduction levers to achieve the established targets. One of these levers employed by companies and that can significantly impact emissions across the entire value chain is product and service design. Companies can reduce emissions by designing more efficient products so then that the life cycle intensity is lower, and also by integrating circular economy principles into product and service design. So this is what this work aims to explore. We try to understand which circular economy related product and service design strategies have been employed by companies that are setting science-based targets. And that's because there's been calls in the literature for more research exploring the links between circular economy and carbon emission reduction. To explore the questions that I just mentioned, we adopt a case-based research methodology. We looked for companies that are committing to science-based targets on the Carbon Disclosure Project or CDP website. We focused on European companies because in June 2021, the European Union adopted a European climate law, establishing that companies in the European Union would reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. So since then, companies in Europe have been adopting targets, and they are implementing initiatives to achieve those targets. So it's representative. This sample of companies in EU is representative. And we also focus on companies in the Nordic region, and that's because the Nordic countries have this shared vision of becoming the most sustainable and integrated region in Europe by 2030. So, they also signed the Declaration on Carbon Neutrality recently. So companies in these countries actually are taking a lot of initiatives to reach the established targets. We initially selected 112 companies, and then by looking at their reports, their climate change reports, we ended up with a sample of 96 companies. And then we performed a content analysis of their reports to identify these circular economy strategies that they are adopting. And we classify the strategy that they are adopting following this theoretical framework, which is called Circular Economy Scanner, and was developed in some previous work developed in our group. Right, in terms of the results, we found that 93 companies have changed their products and service strategies somehow to meet the established targets. 19 didn't mention or describe how they have changed their product strategies to deal with climate risks, and only 12 companies mentioned that they are innovating their products to be adapted for a circular economy in a climate change scenario. In terms of these strategies, we observe that the majority of the companies are employing reducing, restoring, and avoiding strategies. 10% are focusing on recirculation of parts and materials, and 30% are focusing on the recirculation of materials or the end of life of materials to capture some residual value at the end of the product life. In terms of the recirculation, in terms of the reduce, restore, and avoid strategies, we found that most manufacturing firms are focusing on improving efficiency in product use through low consumables of energy and resource, also by improving energy efficiency and by using cleaner sources of energy. And then the focus of the majority of companies may be related to the fact that in the EU there is currently a directive related to energy efficiency in products. We also found that 12% of the companies are focusing on enabling product longevity through design for durability and high robustness. And a huge focus has been placed on reducing and avoiding impact regarding sourcing and raw materials. So 6% of the companies reported being focusing on improving efficiency in the sourcing process. In terms of recirculation of parts, products, and materials strategies, we found that only 10% of the companies reported engaging in designing products for repair and maintenance, but a high proportion of companies are focusing on capturing residual value or reducing value loss from the continued use of materials. And that's by either extending materials lifespan or cascading these materials to a subsequent use. So we observed that a small number of companies, only 20%, are actually using multiple strategies at the same time. We also identified that less focus has been placed on designing products for slowing loops and closing loops at the same time. And few companies, less than 10%, actually mentioned that they are adding service to support their products or servitizing their products as part of their change in their business strategies. So overall, we noticed that there is still a need for a life cycle focus, and there remain opportunities to cut emissions related to use of new resources, by extending existing use cycles to recirculation of products and parts. And we also observe that companies need to explore multiple strategies and synergies among these different strategies. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tyler, for that presentation as well. That brings us to the close of the 5 presentations. And one more time, congratulations to Ola and Claudia and to Floris and for the reviewers' favorite presentations. So we're going to share the screen this way or rather share our pictures. And I'd like to invite all of you who have posed a question to join the conversation as well, if you'd like to. If not, I'll be reading out your questions for you. Also, if it doesn't function for you technically. So yeah, and remember all of you to also give the last presenter some space. I can see that at the end of the presentation rounds are always the ones where the last presenter gets the fewer questions. So remember the last presenter whilst we're chatting as well. So I'm going to open the discussion, and the first question, and we're going to take one person at a time, and we have around about 7 minutes per person, and actually lots of questions. So the question needs to be to come relatively quickly, and the answers need to be relatively short. And this should be the start of a discussion which continues for the rest of the year at least. So Daniela, you asked the first question to Ola.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to understand a little bit better what you mean by the systemic nature of sustainability, Ola, and how having this systemic perspective might change the way that we design in the future towards more sustainable solutions.
Thank you very much for the question. The systemic nature is simply that it's wherever you focus, you are dependent on the other dimensions of sustainability. So it's very difficult to isolate one single question. Isolating and focusing on CO2, for instance, is likely to generate other problems if you don't do so. So that's the human nature of doing that. How it affects and how it impacts design, I think that is a challenge, of course. How do we combine that kind of systemic thinking that attracts a certain type of people or competences to actually also be or communicate with the more technology or narrow focused people who may have solutions important for the systemic level. So it's a vertical challenge.
Thanks for that. The next question is coming from Grant, and I can see that Grant has not joined us on the chat, so I'm going to read the question out to keep the flow. And this is also for you, Ola, and he's thanking you for a nice presentation and saying it seems to him that cross-disciplinary will need to go beyond engineering. What are your thoughts on this, and how can it be better facilitated in both research and industry environments?
Yeah, thank you again for the question, and it's actually more on that in this paper already. What we had in mind is we saw, and we were also reported on the need to bring in like ethics, politics, juridical questions, law, people who are not considered being designers, and we can see that as well, and we can see that they may they need to be respected and involved somehow with design experts as well. Design thinking is one approach, of course, to that, but how can we bring it also into the engineering community?
Thanks for that answer. And then I had the question myself. I had a number of questions in there, but I'm going to pick the central ones out. You mentioned about that we should look at proven ability and resilience. Mm-hmm. What do you mean there? Is it, and what was the discussion about? Was it of the designer, of the product, of the company, of the design process itself? What's the most important focus areas?
I think it came in the workshop in several ways. One was on the product themselves being more adaptable to changes, and we will need to design for unknown conditions. Otherwise, so that's one. The other perhaps more important one was that this was when the pandemic was still very much on. We were maximum 25 people in the rooms, causing a bit of headache for us as organizers. But companies reported that they really shifted their way of working instantly and adapted to this new way of working remotely. So when threatened, we can adapt and we can make changes. On the same matter, sustainability comes slowly, and we are perhaps we don't feel the imminent threat for that as much as we do when you shut down your mobility, basically.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that the pandemic comes and goes. It seemed like a long time, but in the long stretch of things, it came quickly and went relatively quickly again. Whereas sustainability problems have been coming for many decades, and they manifest themselves, and whatever change we make will manifest itself first later. Okay, thank you for that. We may come back to for a general round at the end, but let's move on to Brita. And I must apologize, I spelled your name wrong, Brita, in my comment. But I'm going to yield my comment first and give way to Jeremy. You have a question for Brita.
Yeah, can you hear me? Great. I think the paradigm was really interesting, changing to the relationship focus. I was just curious how that specifically works out. Like, can you describe maybe one of the case studies that you sort of flipped through, or something specific about how it changes what gets designed, or how designers do things?
I think we lost Brita once again.
I just saw that. Yeah, let's move on to the next speaker, and then hopefully Brita will come back. I hope it wasn't stage fright, but it was technicalities that meant that we lost Brita. I think so. Panos, we're going to go over to you now, and there's a number of questions for you. And the first one, actually, Jeremy, let's take you first, because you didn't get the chance to ask Brita her question there.
Well, hey Tim. I was going to try to answer the questions in the way they were written. Then we can save some time. Would that be okay?
We've got enough time. It's fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We can start with Jeremy then.
Yeah.
If that's
good to you, Jeremy.
With the question for Anabel.
Right. So I can.
Yes, for Anabel. Yes.
Okay. With
So I like the system that you're putting together to quantify social impacts. I'm wondering how you're going to get the data for it, because the biggest problem that I see with existing social life cycle assessment stuff is that you only get data on the whole country level, like for all of China or all of Germany or something. And obviously that varies hugely from factory to factory or company to company. So I'm wondering how you'll populate it with data.
So the motivation for this, I made a note, the general motivation is that it's more aspirational to point the paucity of work in trying to link quantitatively engineering type of modeling of systems, sustainability-oriented systems, with the actual impact they have on the community. Now, the specific thing has to do with our work in this Africa Design project. And there's a particular one where we're working with a group in Uganda to try to figure out in a particular location in Uganda how installing an irrigation system supported by a microgrid would actually improve the crop yield and, quote, the livelihoods, of the farming community there. So it's very specific. And in fact, the model itself is a very complicated model because it includes local weather data and so forth that affect the needs for water as well as for energy and so forth. It's a stochastic, multi-system of systems kind of thing. And so what we try to do at the beginning is to capture the benefit through a profit function as the simplest surrogate for social impact. The question that you raise about locality is absolutely correct. And in this case, just like we use very localized data for weather, we would want to use localized input, from the community. And I can expand on it a little bit, maybe answering some of the questions that were raised by a couple of others like Tim and Daniela. The attributes that we sort of discovered and more or less thought about in the paper, they are not measured in the same way. You could reduce them all to money, but that's not very useful. You could also come up with a utility function of some sort, the way they do in utility theory, and how that could be done, it's open. What you can do is use techniques we've used before in linking, in exploring attributes that are not directly measurable. For example, you can use surveys with questions that allow people to make choices among attributes and evaluate them, and you create sort of a max differential, if you're familiar, the max diff process, to rank the importance of attributes. And then you can use tools like conjoint analysis to actually look at the relative weights among the attributes. We haven't done that yet, but the idea is to do that at the local level of the community we're talking about. So I don't know, Jeremy, that kind of addresses your question. Hasn't been done, but that's sort of the plan.
If it didn't address your question, you do it after the session because it was a long answer. And I think, Panos, you got both some of Daniela's and mine and Ola's as well. But Daniela, did you get your question answered about system dynamics?
The system dynamics, the answer is no. At this point, we really haven't thought about using that because the system is already very complex and dynamic as it is. So maybe you can point to me some further idea what you really mean with this.
Yeah, of course, it's a modeling approach and a simulation approach for exactly complex systems. So I think it could help you to identify what are the key factors leading to the behavior that you are observing and how to address them. But we can talk more about that later on.
You're talking about discrete event simulation type of analysis?
Yeah, it's a system dynamics modeling and simulation approach.
Yeah, no, the answer is no, we haven't really pursued that plan yet.
Great. Ola, you asked a question as well to Panos about factors that are possible or not possible or simple to include. But I think, Panos, you answered that one as well. So I think we'll go on to the next speaker here. So thanks for that. Sure. And if we get time at the end, we'll do a roundup. So over to you, Floris. So you had lots of praise for your presentation and some specific questions again. And let's take Grant's question first this time. He's saying, very interesting presentation. Did the designers you interviewed feel that they were successful in implementing the sustainable actions that you identified, or were these more aspirational, the identified barriers?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that question. We intentionally did this interview around what has worked for them. So we asked them for good examples, which was a political choice, so that we could actually share all those examples with everybody and nobody be embarrassed for what didn't work. That being said, of course, some best practices weren't fantastic. For example, one organization shared an example of improving environmental sustainability by moving the trash cans further out of the office. That was the best thing they had. So clearly there were different levels, but we didn't ask about barriers.
Okay, thanks for that answer. I'm going to give myself the word next time, Floris. And this was regarding the very nice summary. You had lots of information in the presentation. It was nice you summarized it on the designers as the different roles and with the 18 attributes, depending on what level of almost maturity you could say that the companies were at. And I only saw one of the areas that actually mentioned tools and methods or tools and toolboxes. But over the last 30 years, we've identified or made over 1,000 tools in academia, but also in industry. Can you comment on why there were no more tools in there? Was it a different view you were taking, or why did they only come in one of the attributes there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we didn't have an agenda there, so it's not like we were not looking for tools or asking about the tools specifically. So we just went by the stories that the designers told us, and it was much more about navigating the organizational structure, the conversations they had with the different departments. it might be good to note also that rarely are designers in that decision-making power to just use the tools and make the changes. Like very much of their role is convincing other people, balancing those interests. So I'm sure more tools are being used, but in sharing those examples, they themselves emphasized how they're communicating with others.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. It'd be nice to complement it the other way around and see where tools were being actually design tools were being implemented at the different levels as well.
100%.
Yeah, a further study. Daniela, you also had a question you had it to Florian, but it's actually for Floris.
I'm sorry about that, Floris. It almost looks that I had never met you. But my question is about the design for environmentally behavior. Could you give us some good examples of companies and designers that are actually doing that? Because what I see is that usually our designs lead to bad behavior in terms of sustainability. So I wonder, what are the good cases there?
Yeah, I think some examples. One designer shared an example of how they've improved the user experience of the recycling process. So where, of course, like often design is targeted at like how to make a good like purchasing process. They focus on the recycling process and make that pleasant. And another one also shared an example where they gave gift cards to people who recycled or returned their old products. So that's one side of it. Then another set of examples was more around the communication of the products. So that would be showing the carbon footprint of the product where you buy them. So in the online shop, or there was one company that had like a calculator how much energy was saved if they purchased a certain product. Another example. There was one company that made the most sustainable option the default. So you would have to choose the less sustainable option if you really wanted it. So these are some examples of nudges towards more environmentally sustainable behavior.
Okay, thanks for that. So last but not least, we move over to Tyler. And Tyler, we have a number of questions for you. And Jeremy, you're going to get the first shot at the questions here, and then Gaetano. Over to you, Jeremy.
Okay, yeah, I really like the empirical nature of your study. It's really nice to see hard numbers on this stuff. And I know that you're just asking them to self-report. So, you know, who knows how real the numbers are, but it's still great to have that kind of empirical data. So I appreciated that. I'm curious what your sort of advice is for sustainable design researchers or just sustainable designers in general of how we should push industry going forward based on all the data that you got.
Yeah, oh, thanks for the very interesting question. Yeah, of course, there are limitations in the sense that the sample that we select was only based on Nordic companies, and the sample is limited as well to European companies. That doesn't mean that other companies in other regions are not employing circular economy strategies to reach their carbon emission reduction targets. But from this analysis, it was a very exploratory analysis. It was quite evident that companies still don't see how they could use their initiatives related to circular product design to reach the emission target. So I think from our perspective as designers and researchers, we should make this link more evident and perhaps point out what are the contributions of these different strategies to reduce the emissions, because this link is not very clear in theory and in practice. We do know that circular economy has a potential to contribute to sustainability and emission reduction, but it's not clear how much each strategy actually can contribute. So I think doing some research on that direction, also making that evident to companies can help them to perceive the value and also start employing more circular initiatives to reach the established targets.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks for that. And over to you, Gaetano, for your question.
Well, actually, I was building on your theme, but let's say that it would be nice, Talia, if you can maybe share whether you recognize any specific barriers in why there is this delay in adopting circularity, whether it depends on the specific application field, whether it is, I mean, I wonder whether there are actual difficulties due to technological barriers, or it is more a matter of inertia. So just that I don't really need to make it because I don't feel the pressure. So I'm just lagging behind. Whether this study you made, which is very interesting, maybe allowed you to highlight what is the source of these barriers.
Yeah, it's a very, very good question as well. So from the analysis, because we analyzed the reports and was for manufacturing companies, because those are the ones who are mostly employing circular economy initiatives. So we thought that the connection of circularity and carbon reduction would be more evident in the case of those companies, but we are quite was like the findings were unexpected in that sense, because we observed that the focus has been placed on improving product efficiency and also reducing energy consumption during the use phase of the products, and that's possibly also because of legislation in the European Union. But we don't see companies actually saying that they are extending the life cycle of their products, and that has contributed to reducing the emissions. And I think that's because they don't see how much by like changing the design to extend the product life cycle, or changing the design for closing the loops for recycling actually can contribute to that. So my perception is that these companies don't know, they don't see the link because it's not quantifiable yet. So we cannot say, okay, by extending the product life cycle, you're gonna change it can contribute to 30% less of your reduction, emission reduction. So they cannot see that yet because there's no evidence. So that's like, I think it's the main barrier for making the link, and then it's where there is opportunity for research and actually guidance to companies in that sense as well. Where other strategies, for example, improving energy efficiency, they can quantify, okay, by improving, reducing energy consumption during the use phase, actually that contributes to less, then it's not clear in the case of other circular economy strategies. So that's the main barrier I see.
Thank you.
Thanks for that Q&A. We have one final question from Praveen, which I'm going to read out in a second. But before that, for the whole of you, all the audience, all of you who are listening in or watching in, I have a final reflection question there for you. It's the very last question in the chat. Just write in the chat what you think the main takeaways are from the session. And if any of you, if we get time at the end, we can discuss those as well. But Tyler, the last question that comes from Praveen is saying he's thanking you for a very insightful presentation, and he's wondering if you found any correlation between the climate impact and efforts on end of life or recycling.
Yeah, what we found was like less than 30% of the sample mentioned actually that they are changing their products and designing for recycling, and that's like one of the strategies that they are using for cutting emissions. But there's no like evidence. That's because of the nature of the report as well. So in the report they only report what they are doing. So there's no data about how much each strategy is contributing to their emission reduction. So that's but it was like a very small proportion of the companies actually reported on that. So clearly there are opportunities in that sense as well.
Great. I think we got just about through all of the questions that were posed just after each of the presentations. I can say that for the final one there, that the science-based targets one is such a, I think it's one of the most promising agendas that I've seen to where companies are actually committing to really radical CO2 reductions in their what they call the scope 1 and 2, which is more the internal related activities, but also scope 3, which is the whole value chain, where many companies that are connected to our type of research, so product development and design, they often have about 90% plus of their CO2 embedded in the value chain. So it's the biggest commitment I've seen. But at the same time, if circularity and the carbon reduction strategies are somehow at loggerheads with each other, then we're in a slight problem. We've actually just recently opened a position for a postdoc looking at exactly that. So I think it's a good potential area for research in the future. Good. While I was just chatting away there to give people a chance to come with their reflections. So Elise writes that it's not really a takeaway, but saying great work, seeing larger studies on what's happening in industry. And I think that's been very nice about this session, actually, that it's actually crossed the environmental and the social sustainability elements in particular. So Panos, the paper that you co-author on, but also Brita, who unfortunately dropped out, were very much on the social sustainability elements, and the others on, you could say, the broader elements of environmental and other social sustainability activities as well. Panos, you're writing something here. Do you want to voice it to us in the last minutes here? And there's time for you others to write as well. So.
I'm sorry, are you supposed?
Would you like to motivate it for us?
Oh, okay. I just said that from hearing all this and other papers, actually, not just in this session, it's very clear to me that this sort of design thinking, let's call it, approaches that we use in the community really can be very useful to look at specifically at sustainability problems, not just to solve them, but even to pose them correctly. And I don't think other communities necessarily have this type of frame of mind. They can look at specific things like how to use better materials and so forth. But like Daniela said further down, to take sort of the system design approach is maybe something this community can be very effective if it pursues this more.
I agree. Daniela, do you want to follow up on that one?
Yeah, I think that it was really interesting to see that the discussions were ranging all the way from the micro level with the designers to the meso level, what the companies are doing and the value chains, but also at the very macro level, at the societal level, with the welfare system and so forth. It just shows that the discussions that we might be having towards sustainability, they are cross levels and cross boundaries, and therefore require a systemic view to manage the trade-offs, as Panos and his work talked about, but also to potentially anticipate and avoid the unintended consequences of the good intentions that we have when we do sustainable design, but we sometimes fail to actually gather all of the benefits from them.
Thanks, Daniel. And this brings us actually full circle to Ola's presentation in the beginning, and I can see Ola's taking us on a treasure hunt around Italy somewhere here. But and Laura's actually commented on Ola's on your comment, Daniela, but which brings us back that saying that she agrees with Daniela on the need for a systemic view, but the huge challenge there is to actually how do we actually support and enable a systems approach in practice, and this is one of the very important points that Ola made in the beginning there. Floris, did you have your hand up just there?
No, I was just cheering that on. Yeah,
you're cheering it on. So Gaetano, you're going to get one of the last words here. Motivate your comment. You need to unmute yourself.
Actually, Laura posted also following Daniela, but I was just saying that it is nice to listen to your reflections about what should be done and the resources we have in this community. I was just wondering what is missing. I mean, because if we want to go ahead, if we want to advance, apart from recognizing the assets, the resources we have, it is also important to be aware of what is missing. And well, I'm really open to listen to further reflections in this direction.
I can take a crack at this, Gaetano. I think the key thing is to be able to talk across engineers, social scientists, business people with the same language, or at least with similar words. And our community mostly is dominated by engineering backgrounds. But I think the design thinking sort of allows us to be a little broader in our way of thinking, and maybe we can reach some better understanding going across, right? But I think that's the key thing. I don't know how many real social scientists, not those of us who dabble, but I'm talking about really doing social science. You know, do we have, let's say, in the design community, or for that matter, economists? So anyway, that's my take on this.
Yeah, so keep the multidisciplinary approach to this. And I think it's quite interesting to see the different research groupings and centers which are popping up different places, which are from the outset becoming quite multidisciplinary. So I think we see interesting developments there, but still not really multidisciplinary. So it could be nice to focus more on that. Jeremy, you have a comment?
Oh yeah, just to reply to Gaetano. So me and Sophie Halstead and Stephen Hoffinson and Mike Sidon, a few other people, we actually wrote a whole paper on what we think needs to be done in terms of, we called it a research roadmap for sustainable design methods and tools. And some of it is about what we think needs to be developed in terms of better methods and tools. And some of it is about how do we get better adoption and integration in industry of the tools that already exist.
Thank you, Jeremy. Great. Everybody, it's been a really nice session. Thank you very much for the really nice presentations and the papers. I'm not sure if you've read the papers yet, but I actually did do that, and they're worth reading. So if you just saw the videos, see those as a teaser to something even better. And the videos were great. So go and read the papers afterwards. And I hope that we can keep this discussion and dialogue going and really lift the level of our research, which becomes better and better from conference to conference and from each time we see each other. And I know that Panos is the leader of one journal. We have a number of journals around as well, so we could maybe take some of these conversations from these papers and the conferences further to different levels in our journal writing as well. And that's a note to myself also. So
yeah, thank you. Just please keep that in mind. We have avenues to publish this work.
Exactly. And you can see all those different outlets on the Design Society website. So many thanks for joining. Elise says she cannot find the papers. If you're thinking about the papers from today, then you need to log into ConfTool. And maybe Robert, if you are quick on the keyboard, you could write the link, or somebody just write in the chat the link to ConfTool. And then you need to log in the same way as you actually register for the conference. Once you're logged in, the first link takes you to an overview of the program. And then in the program, you can actually see every single, if you click on the top button for each session, it takes you to the session with links to the papers and to the videos. So I think this is a really, really nice resource to prepare yourself now, but also afterwards. Just while we have 30 seconds left, the papers will also appear on Cambridge University Press. And they will do that within the next couple of weeks' time. And then they will become, of course, fully open access, available. And then after that, we will list them on the Design Society with a link directly to the Cambridge University Press site. And then after that, they get charted on Scopus and so forth. So thanks, Floris, for putting the link in there. That takes us to about 30 seconds, 10 seconds before the closing time. So many thanks for a really nice session. I think it's been great fun and really informative to be part of the session. And note each other's names and papers and email addresses, and let's keep the good work going. And there's more tomorrow as well. So don't forget the social event just now, which has been put in the permanent chat at the top, has been pinned. It takes you into GatherTown, which is a nice way to informally see each other with videos as well. It's worth doing for an after session chat. Many thanks. I'll hereby close the session and see you all, if not in GatherTown, tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tim.